It's Gate Crashers Live with RJ Duranti and Dan McMahon. Today's topic is Adam Sandler.
Wow, thank you. Settle down. So excited to be here with you tonight for our first ever Gate Crashers Live. Episodes talking about different comedians who got their breaks on Saturday Night Live, where we take a look at their work and see if it's something for you. We talk about different themes that may not be explored in pop culture because a lot of these comedies are looked down upon. My co-host is Richard Duranti, who you may know from his own show, Sex and Whiskey. Before we get into everything, RJ, where did your relationship with Adam Sandler start?
Wow, that's a good opener. Sandler. So for me, it probably starts with Billy Madison. I was 5 or 6 when it first came out. My parents were very much so try and watch a family movie together. I don't think they grasped what Sandler was about. So we put it on, and I laughed at what I could commiserate with, being myself in preschool, first grade at the time. So, but yeah, no, there was some moments that I kind of cringed even at that young of an age when you were watching anything like that with your parents. But otherwise I thought it was hysterical. And then, I grew up with Waterboy, Happy Gilmore, Little Nicky, Mr. Deeds, Eight Crazy Nights, stuff like that. And I feel like my humor resonated so much because even though it's sophomoric at best, it also kind of has this underlying tone of what's the real story behind here? It was funny. And then later on, when you go back and watch it, you're like, oh, wow, there actually was a plot to this. It wasn't just a bunch of dick and fart jokes. So, but what about you? You were a couple years apart. So you probably had a different dynamic. Mm-hmm.
So I didn't get to experience the golden age of SNL and the people who I think are my favorite comedians, these guys. But so I think my first Sandler, my parents were very young, so I don't hold them against them. But I think my dad took me to see Big Daddy in theaters. I think I saw it in theaters, and then after that, I got to see Billy Madison and Happy Gilmore when it came to a double DVD, and I bought it when I was younger. Mm-hmm. But my most visceral memory of my youth and Adam Sandler was, I want to say it was probably 4th or 5th grade, and my buddy and I were like, oh, we're old enough to go to the movies by ourselves. We're going to see a cool movie with a funny guy. So my buddy and I got the newspaper because at the time you couldn't just easily look up, because this is right when the internet was starting. So you could get on there, but it was really hard. Now
I'm trying to imagine you opening up a newspaper, flipping it a couple times, reading the periodicals, going, okay, showtime.
We stood in front of my garage looking at this newspaper, knowing that our parents could drive us there. So we're like, oh, what's out? Oh, this movie has Adam Sandler. We should go see this. Me and my buddy, 4th or 5th grade. So we go to see Spanglish. So I remember seeing Spanglish at a very young age, thinking that I'm walking into a fun Adam Sandler. He says naughty, bad words, and they do gross stuff. What I walked into was a sad, romance movie that, you know what? Honestly, I don't think maybe my buddy should have been there. There was a lot of adults, and it was... so yeah, my most visceral memory is seeing Spanglish in theaters. And then for a long time, I was like, I don't know if I want to see more Adam Sandler movies. But then I realized that actors can be in more than one thing.
Yeah, I'm glad I was going down that river with you. I was waiting for it to divide into. Yeah, so we're sitting down watching Rain on Me, and
so for this we watched Rain on Me.
We watched Rain on Me, Punch Drunk Love, Uncut Gems, just straight through. Dabbled in some Spanglish.
Then Hotel Transylvania 2, not the first one.
Not the first one, second one, and then the last half of the third one. And then the fourth one, which he's technically not in, they had to hire a voice actor that was similar enough to him because he did not want to come back.
What?
Oh yeah, that's a thing. There was a fourth Hotel Transylvania.
I didn't know there was a third.
It
one,
is
to be honest.
the third one's it's a kid's film.
I've never seen any of them.
Really?
Yeah, I've never seen any of them.
The first one's worth at least watching. But we are, yeah, we'll get into that. So Sandler, let's walk back. Who is Adam Sandler? Where did he get his start? And
so you did a ton of research. I want to put that up front.
I did. I'm an older gentleman. I write everything down. I take copious amounts of notes. So this is
5 pages of notes.
Pretty accurate. My research consisted of everything from old interviews to a couple books, one of them being The Chris Farley Show, which has a great dive into SNL itself and SNL lore, particularly around that early 90s era, which now is looked on favorably. At the time was a ratings nightmare. I will get that out of the way. And I think that the humor just wasn't appreciated then, which it definitely is now.
When you're talking about the history of SNL, they actually call it Lore and Michaels. At least you get Lord Michaels on the show. He would hate me.
Yeah. You know what? Funny enough, he's one of those guys that, like, especially, and I know when they talk about like casting, the guys that all the producers are like, oh, he's going to hate this guy. And he laughs, which is very rare. Which is very, very rare. He does not laugh in auditions or anything like that. There's a handful of guys, one of them being Chris Farley. He actually like belly laughed at Chris Farley's audition. But that's beyond the point.
Did he? I don't think he does, man. The only interview I've ever heard him do was the one with Mark Maron. I don't think I've ever seen him interviewed elsewhere.
I don't think he's been on Letterman or anything like that. I mean, he's a pretty reserved guy. But even when we're talking, you know, the cast still doesn't know his politics at full, even though it's considerably like a liberal leaning. They're still not sure entirely because people like money. So, you know, it is what it is. Did you know Sandler was Jewish?
You know what? Out of all the things I knew about Adam Sandler, that is probably top.
So Adam Sandler's Jewish. He started stand-up comedy when he was 14 or 15, started getting big in the underground circuit in New York. At 17, he was at a show, and one person who kind of picked him out of the crowd was Dennis Miller. Saw him, recommended him to Lorne. Lorne gave him an interview and was like, absolutely. Started on as a writer from like 90 to 91. And what people don't realize is you can be hired as like actual talent, or you can be hired as a writer. Most of the times writers stay writers, generally speaking, because talent is talent. But he actually merged from writing to talent. His the writing room at the time was Robert Smigel, who you might remember as Triumph the Insult Comic Dog. Bob Odenkirk from, I mean, now everyone knows Better Call Saul, and Conan O'Brien. So, I mean, they had a pretty stacked writing room. And when I say writer / talent for Sandler, I'm talking he's writing scripts for himself to pitch, because that's the game. So like the war room in SNL is basically every man for themselves. And there was a lot of undercutting from older talent who's like, no, that's stupid. Like they would actually encourage other people not to laugh at your, like at your, weird. Oh my God. It's, I can only imagine, like, I really take stuff like that to heart. So if nobody laughed at anything I said, I'd probably just quit and kill myself.
That's so weird. Like politics of that kind of shit, like comedy, like you're trying to make people laugh, but I get they're trying to get themselves over, but goddamn, that must, oof.
And a lot of it carried over from like the 70s and 80s. There's a ton of turmoil. You can get into that, do a lot of reading, but this like 90 to 95, we'll say, was like this early bright spot that we look on favorably because of the talent that came out of it. We're talking Sandler shared an office with Chris Rock, who they wrote a lot together. Sandler knew Rock a lot because Rock also did a lot of underground stand-up comedy, and he himself focused more on the stand-up part of his act, and he had talked about how SNL was kind of his point because he knew he wanted to do stand-up comedy, he wanted to do TV and film, and then he wanted to go back to stand-up comedy, which is kind of what he does. He flip-flops back and forth. So he at least had like a streamlined career goal. Across the hall from them was David Spade and Chris Farley. I'm not going to tell a ton of Chris Farley because we want to talk more about Chris Farley. If I think this can eventually be a series, which is our hope and stuff like that. So I'll get into that. But the person that kind of gave Sandler his biggest break was Norm Macdonald. Now, if you don't have, if you don't know who Norm Macdonald is or have any clue, just Google Norm Macdonald Weekend Update. He wrote a lot of the stuff himself. Weekend Update was this portion of SNL that basically talked the news, but made it funny and lighthearted. Some of the jokes do not fly now. I'm just going to be honest with you. It just does not fly now. But Norm had such a deadpan delivery, and he covered everything from like O.J. Simpson trial, which eventually led to his downfall at SNL. Some of the early Michael Jackson stuff. He just was very, deadpan humor, and he took a liking to Sandler. So he gave Sandler a break on SNL by bringing his characters on to Weekend Update and letting him do them, like Opera Man. That was like the first thing because they realized that Sandler actually was a talented musician and songwriter, but in the sense of Weird Al, where it was more parody and, making light and fun of situations.
It is. So, I didn't realize Norm Macdonald was like, I thought they came up together. I didn't realize Norm was there before him. Norm Macdonald was a very, very funny guy for a very specific type of humor. Right. And if you don't like his specific type of humor, it's not going to make sense why he's so deadpan.
He told dad jokes at a roast. And God. you could tell like of the comedians sitting up on the roast, like who aligned with that humor, and they were like red in the face, like belly laughing. And then the other ones were just like, who the fuck is this guy like up here telling these jokes? Like they're not landing at all. Awesome. But it was so brave of someone to do that in such, a widespread event that a lot of people are going to see, obviously. But yeah, Norm kind of gave him the, the Don pat on the shoulder and was like, do your thing, kid, like have fun. While this all is happening, Sandler graduates NYU, the Tisch School in 91. Okay. While he was there, he met this guy named Tim Herlihy, who was actually in the law school at the time. Herlihy became one of Sandler's co-writers and would give him ideas for SNL. One of them being Canteen Boy and a couple of the sketches that he's done with Farley. So this guy, who eventually becomes a lawyer, helped Sandler craft some of his most famous roles. And he goes on. He
went on to become a lawyer too. Like he actually went on to practice law.
Full attorney. Yep. Yeah.
After he helping write like Happy Gilmore.
So we're talking Billy Madison, Happy Gilmore, Big Daddy, Waterboy, all Herlihy co-written with Sandler. And then Herlihy's son Martin is currently on the show, the Please Don't Destroy Trio on SNL.
So I saw that note because your note
is nepotism wonderful.
Now those guys I've been watching for a while, and when they showed up on SNL, my mind was fucking blown because they have the kind of humor I like, and because the people who I currently like on SNL have all left. Like now that I say that out loud, I have blanked on all of their names. Not Colin Jost, god damn it, Beck Bennett and all of
Beck
them.
Bennett, yes. Mm-hmm.
Beck Bennett and Kyle Mooney. They had a group just like that before SNL, which I've watched millions of times. Mm-hmm. If you go on YouTube and look up The Toast, one of my favorite videos, Scarlett yells at me every time I turn it on. But I seen these guys, I was like, oh, maybe there is a future for this show. Mm-hmm. Didn't know he was the kid of Martin. But their skits they're very absurd and funny, so...
I mean, and SNL is weird in that there will always be this 3 or 4 person you reliable characters, all right? Mm-hmm. So you write a skit And again, this is just from a lot of reading that I've done about SNL. So you write a skit and you say to yourself, okay, I'm leaning towards these guys as like our main proponents, but you always want one of the background people to be like, you're reliable. So you get into this routine of like when Farrell came up, right? So Farrell comes up in like 95, 96. Farrell was a background character for a decent amount of time, but they noticed that for some reason the audiences would like pick up on his like just body charisma and his like humor. And they'd be like, oh, he's in the scene. Something funny is going to happen. And it just became that expectation until they get so comfortable with you. Now you're a leading person. Now you're in every skit pretty much. I mean, there was a time where Farrell in the early 2000s, you know, he was starting the show as George H.W. Bush, and he was pretty much in every single skit throughout the entire episode, which probably is why he got burnt out so quickly and did movies and stuff like that. But anyway, that's the thing. So going back to Sandler, Thanksgiving song, Hanukkah song, Opera Man, Gap Girls, pretty much any scene he did with Farley was generally received well. But again, this humor was very weird, I guess, for them, but it'd be the same as us with like Mooney and Bennett and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Some of Mooney's stuff was out there, and then you rewatch it a year, 2, 3 years, and you're like, oh my God, that was actually really
They're
good.
Usually
that was
the
really
ones
funny.
that get cut.
Yeah.
They're usually cut for time. But I do want to talk about Thanksgiving song, and I am not Jewish, but the Hanukkah song was Adam being like, oh, I don't have any songs for people like me. Like, I'm going to write a funny Hanukkah song because how many fucking songs are there about Christmas?
Too many.
Those songs get played every year. Like, it's not just a one-off skit. Every Thanksgiving, WMMR plays Thanksgiving song like the whole week before. So it's like I'm still hearing this stuff in my day-to-day life. So it's interesting to see how big that went from just like a small skit on SNL.
And it's weird too, because there was a whole other drag on about the two songs that he wrote on SNL and what is considered owned content by SNL versus content that you have written and done yourself. So I'm not sure that Sandler actually gets anything from either of those because of where they were written and how like proprietary information is done. It's the same thing if like you worked at a hospital and you discovered something, or Disney and you discovered something. If you work
at Disney, anything you create while you work for Disney is
Disney. Yeah. But beyond the point. So anyway, Sandler obviously has this run, as we said, Spade, Farley, Chris Rock. Now we're getting to late 95. Ratings are down. Execs are tired. They're thinking about kicking Lorne out. Now, Lorne has kind of been the saving grace of all these guys being like, no. Like, you know, they thought
about kicking Lorne Michaels out.
This is one of a handful of times that they've thought about firing Lorne. One in the 80s, the 90s, not so much in the past 20 or so years that I know of, but at that time.
It's his show.
Tell me about it.
That's wild.
He was actually in the 80s. He was replaced for a season or two, and then it came back, if I remember so. But anyway, the execs were tired of their antics. Now, antics to you and I is probably a little different than antics to them. Farley obviously had a very bad drug problem. It was widely known, very bad drug problem, but he was always on. When I'm talking about antics on the other side of the room, because Sandler was pretty straight-laced, actually. And I figured that just from how he carries himself now and, you know, kind of how he was focused on a career and everything like that. But his antics included him, and this is my favorite one, was late night prank calls with Chris Farley, where they would literally go through the phone book and just pick somebody and call them and harass the shit out of them. Now, they got the number from somebody to the United Nations. and they were picking countries that at the time had dictators.
Jesus Christ.
And Farley was asking for the dictator. Can I speak to the dictator? And it got back to Lorne that someone from 30 Rock was calling the UN.
They're calling from. It's like Bart Simpson, like he's calling from the Simpsons house.
Pretty much. So 95 ends. Farley, Mike Myers, Jay Moore, Michael McKean, Kevin Nealon, David Spade in 96, Adam Sandler, all get let go.
Jesus Christ.
95, 96, this is what we consider like the second renaissance. Will Ferrell, Daryl Heyman, Sherry O'Terry, Tracy Morgan, Chris Kattan, Anna Gasteyer, and Molly Shannon all joined the show. We all know those names, obviously. I mean, you go hard pressed to find anything from, I would say 98, 99 is when they really pick up steam, to the early 2000s. And then you have your second one when the Sandbergs and Chris Parnell and Sudeikis and Hader later on. But the big thing that I find insane is after Sandler, and this is how much of an impact that I think he had, you constantly had these guys that I think Lorne saw as his Sandler replacement. I'm talking Jimmy Fallon, I'm talking Andy Samberg, and I'm talking Pete Davidson.
Before we get into talking about Samberg and Davidson, I fucking hate Jimmy Fallon. Everything about that man I fucking despise.
There's no love in this house for him either.
It's I've talked about it many times on the show. I fucking hate him. And I think Chris Kattan should have the fame that Fallon got. Chris Kattan is so fucking funny, but he like fell off. And I don't know enough to speak into it if something happened, but
20 seconds or less, Kattan gets injured during a skit that causes lifelong back pain and opioid addiction. He sued SNL multiple times to try and get back pay for health insurance that was pulled from him. And to this day, he still has not gotten payment for it. And if you go see any of his stand-ups, which unfortunately now he obviously had an opioid addiction, he talks a lot about kind of the backroom drama. And it's good if you want to just listen to SNL stories because there's no real stand-up to it. Yeah. But yeah, that's what happened to Chris Kattan. Yeah.
But Samberg and Davidson, I think Samberg changed SNL. He brought it back from the dead with the digital swords and stuff. But I think Davidson does legitimately have the same energy as Adam Sandler.
Yes.
Like I could see both of them walking down the shorts in oversized. I'm also wearing oversized gym shorts. I was not going to record an Adam Sandler episode without them. But when Adam Sandler came back to do the show and him and Pete Davidson were doing skits together.
Yeah.
It was like, this is the funniest fucking thing. Or when they did the quarantine special or whatever, and Pete Davidson did the song about living at home, and then Adam Sandler came in as the feature. I was like, this is the shit I live for. I love these two, and I would love to see them make a movie more than I ever want to remember. Was it Mama's Boy? What was the movie they made together? Sandberg and
that's my. What is it? That's my boy. That's my boy. I know. Oh my god, I know. And it's crazy because and we'll get into Happy Madison Productions later on, and I'll get there's a whole side of that.
I want to know where like Dante and like Jonathan come in, because I the thing about Sandler is that this is fun for him. Like he loves just hanging out with his bros, and his all of his friends are always in all of his movies, and we'll talk about that. But let's talk about what we watched before.
We did watch stuff. We watched films for this. There was films to be watched.
So we watched 5 movies. We watched Billy Madison, The Wedding Singer. We watched Big Daddy. We also watched 50 First Dates and Uncut Gems. So if you have not seen those films, go watch them. You've heard us talk about Adam Sandler. He's a goofy guy. Like, it's worth checking some of these films out with keeping in mind that they're older, so a lot of the stuff has not aged well. There's a lot of shit in there that is not good, but without that stuff, there is actually some really good themes and like wholesome stuff in most of his films. Just there's also some bad stuff too. So just full warning there.
Just take the quote that Disney has with some of its older films like Fantasia and stuff like that, like, you know, culturally relevant for the time, and you know what was like kind of and acceptable isn't even the right word because it shouldn't have been acceptable, and we completely acknowledge that here. But what was kind of deemed acceptable, I guess, is the way to phrase it. But also, if you don't like this list, there are plenty of other Sandler films. I know everybody has their 5. This collection here, we focused on 2 comedies, 2 of his kind of romantic comedies, which, yes, Sandler did romantic comedies.
Barrymore's.
And arguably his greatest acting performance of ever in Uncut Gems. So that's kind of how we made our list. Again, I encourage you to watch his most. There's going to be some stinkers in there. We're not gonna beat around the bush. Some of Sandler's later films are not hold up as well, but I guarantee you'll probably laugh through some of them. At least once. So Billy Madison, my first film, already talked about it, comes out in 1995. It's directed by Tamara Davis, who, if you are a fan of the Beastie Boys, that is Mike D's ex-wife. Tamara's allowed Sandler and Tim Hurley, which we talked about, his writing partner from the SNL days, to write the film. Tamara's big portion of Billy Madison, and I think it's one of the reasons why it's one of my favorites, is the fact that she let Adam Sandler be Adam Sandler. She did not note him to death. He has gone on record saying she was one of the easiest directors he's ever worked with because she had a lot of faith with him. And I think actors really have to trust the directors. And I know this sounds crazy, like I'm talking about an Oscar, winning performance or anything like that. But I mean, you can see how much fun he had making this because of who was cast in this film. It's a very impressive, well-rounded comedy, and it's got a little heart to it. So jumping in, obviously not Sandler's first film. We're not going to talk about Overboard or literally the year before this, Brendan Fraser, Steve Buscemi, and Adam Sandler on Airheads. Fantastic film. I have no idea where to watch it. Someone even asked on Twitter a couple days ago, like, does anyone know if this is streaming anywhere? So rent it on Apple TV, I guess, but it's worth a watch. Very good film. Sandler starts.
I have not seen.
You've never seen Airheads?
No, somebody gave me shit about it yesterday.
The cast is very good and the premise itself is ridiculous, but to see Brendan Fraser in his young, hot glory days is a gem, and Steve Buscemi is nuts in it. And Sandler does not play as big as a role, but he is there. And that's the important thing. So Sandler gets $1.7 million for this film, which is a decent chunk and change for someone who literally was only on SNL for a handful of years. And that's his big thing. Sandler has gone to say that Billy Madison is the closest he'll ever be to playing himself, which kind of shows a lot about who he is as a person, and one of the reasons why comedy is probably something that he's always been drawn to. His dad is played by Darren McGavin. You might remember him from A Christmas Story. He played the father. Brigitte Wilson plays his very attractive second or third grade teacher, Veronica Vaughn.
Yes.
So hot. Wife of star tennis player Pete Sampras. But let's just jump into it. So you watch Billy Madison. Just run me through it's how long has it been since you watched it? Like the most recent time versus now.
Before
years.
Probably high school.
Yeah.
I enjoyed. So the beginning, I was not enjoying it. I was like, "Oh, great! It's just going to be him getting hammered." And I was like, "I don't really remember too much about this movie." Norm Macdonald, the man, doesn't do much in this movie. He's fucked up the entire time.
Yes,
but his voice is just so goddamn funny when he like chimes in. Like, I could never do a Norm voice, but he's very funny in it. But then, like, it got to Billy in higher ages where they started talking about the bullying and stuff like that. And I was like, okay, I see this film. Like, I get it now. Like, it's not all just shit.
No.
I honestly think out of all the films we've watched, this is probably my least favorite. Asked me 10 years ago, and this would have been my favorite. I think it's just like, I have very different tastes now than I did then. Was not expecting the musical number, I'll tell you that.
Comes out of nowhere.
Yeah, it's an absolute wild song too. But I think this is the only one with Chris Farley.
Yes.
Because this is before he died. So that also gets an extra points. I love the scene where I almost called her Veronica Mars, but his girlfriend is like, they're studying, and every time he gets a question right, she takes off a piece of clothing. Then later in the film, it's with Chris Farley, and it's just so funny because he's such a ham about it.
Yeah. That is correct.
I love when they throw the sandwich at him and he turns around and he almost crashes the bus. Hey! I love that. But like there's a lot of like really nice moments where like when like I you got a lot of notes, but like the one kid, they go on a field trip and he pees his pants. And like he's a kid, that shit happens. And Billy goes and takes some water and throws it on himself and says all the cool kids are peeing their pants. And like he's like he makes this kid feel okay and is like, oh, everyone has accidents. Like why should this kid? Because kids are mean, and that would have been the rest of his life. They would have called him Pee Pants or something. Pee-Pants. Yeah, something like that. But instead, like he's like, oh, I'll change that. It does seem like that is something that happens in a lot of their movies. Like they never are trying to punch down. They do a ton.
Oh,
a ton.
Yes.
But like there are moments like this where like, all right, he's not. This is just how it was. So I ended up really liking the movie, especially. I think the plot is hilarious. I think there's nothing like it, and I don't think there ever will be again. Where he basically has to go through all of school, 2 weeks for every grade. It's so funny.
All right, before I get into it, you just said another film like this can happen again. Could you imagine? All right, let's step out of reality here. I go to the school and say, yeah, I'm 34. I didn't do great. I want to, as an adult male, start in preschool and work my way up with children. Is that cool? Are we going to be okay with this? I'd be on a list in a minute.
At his house hanging out. You have to let go of reality. Oh yeah. But it is so funny that like he's crank calling this. He's getting the kids to call her, and then he like picks up. God, it is a very funny movie.
So you talked about Norm Macdonald. Yes, he was not sober the entire film. He's gone on record saying he was not sober for the entire film. This is Adam Sandler's mom's favorite film of his. His mom was a preschool teacher, and she just really enjoyed it. I think she also really enjoyed it because this was Sandler's like first film that crossed a 50. It was either 50 or 60 $million like threshold in terms of returns, and like. Again, for inflation, not going to do the calculation here, but this was a box office hit. This was a very much so a success. Some underlying stuff. Bob Odenkirk and Philip Seymour Hoffman were up for the role of Eric that eventually went to Bradley Whitford. Yeah, I know. Philip Seymour Hoffman, I could really see. But you do see his foil eventually in Punch Drunk Love, even though I'm not a huge fan of it. Philip Seymour Hoffman pretty much is phenomenal in everything that he did.
It's not a comedy, is it?
Punch Drunk Love? No. It's they say it's a dark comedy. There was nothing funny about it, but it is what it is.
Philip Seymour Hoffman is a funny guy because like he was in like what's Dirk Diggler? What's that movie called?
Boogie Nights.
Boogie Nights. There we go. What's
that
movie with the big dick?
Yeah. I mean the quotes, the side characters, Chris Farley, his first grade teacher putting paste all over her face for no reason. The old timey woman talking about peeing your pants.
Yeah, if peeing my pants was cool, I'd be Miles Davis.
The clown, okay.
And he comes back in the musical number. He's like, I just broke my leg. Yeah. And you're like, he's been laying there for weeks.
Steve Buscemi, out of nowhere at the end. There's a very heartfelt moment in this film. Obviously, Billy Madison is bullied himself when he goes back to high school because he was a bully when he was in high school. So it's, again, Dan talked about it. Like it kind of hits different feelings when you realize there's more to this film than just a straight out comedy, and Buscemi was unfortunately one of the people that Sandler bullied. So he has this like really, relatively short but deep conversation about, I'm so sorry for how I treated you in high school. And Buscemi was like, don't worry about it. And then you see Steve Buscemi cross his name off of a list of people to kill. And then for no reason at all, just apply red lipstick.
Down. that in today's world, like, that list is not funny, but like watching it, it's just like, all right, that is very funny. Yeah. But then he shows up at the end with a sniper rifle and shoots the guy who's like gonna kill everything. It goes from zero, like, okay, this movie, disbelief, like, he's in school, and then Eric, that's his name, right? Mm-hmm. Pulls a fucking gun out on stage. And then Steve Buscemi shoots him and like looks at Adam Sandler and just goes and like walks away. Like he like grassy knolled this guy and just pops out.
And then Sandler with the thank God I called that guy. I think the film is just a lot about kind of a loss of innocence for a lot of us who are in our mid to late 20s, early 30s, and just realizing now that we're so far removed from school, and kind of like for some of us, it might have been a torturous event. For some of us, it might have been like an escape from home. And there's just a lot there of somebody who's trying to regain that childhood that they kind of didn't have, or maybe just kind of abused it a bit, and trying to find themselves again, and realizing that like, it's time to move on. It's time to be an adult. It's time to like put away your childish things. But even more so than that, still also being able to be a child yourself. Like you could see how much fun he has with like the kids and stuff like that, because at the root of it, he still finds humor in burning bags of dog shit and, just absolutely fucking around when possible. The side thing that I enjoyed, there is a underlying theme when they go to the academic decathlon. And the head of the academic decathlon, for some reason, thinks that his wife is a cheating whore.
He's going through it.
Yeah, he's going through a time. At the end, they have a Jeopardy-style question and answer session. And some of the categories that I pulled from the list, my wife, the tramp, burning dog poo in the human response, my spouse is sleeping around, and I married common street trash.
He's just publicly going through it, and it's just like, Jesus.
But even more so from that, and I will say this will be my last thought on Billy Madison. He has a quote that I used to be able to do verbatim at times. Can't do it anymore. It's been too long. But it was one of my favorite things to say when someone said something so idiotic that you just like have to stare at them for a minute. Mr. Madison, what you just said is one of the most insanely idiotic things I've ever heard. At no point in your rambling, incoherent response were you even close to anything that would be considered a rational thought. Everyone in this room is now dumber for having listened to it. I award you no points, and may God have mercy on your soul. And the reason why this is so fucking funny is because Jim Downey, who was a writer on SNL, used to say it to Chris Farley whenever Chris Farley pitched skits. Because here's the thing, there's a little undercurrent here. Chris Farley used to pitch skits that he knew were not going to work. And he made it a point, because this is a time again when Farley was your guy. He had already done Matt Foley, motivational speaker. People were like, oh, I wonder what Farley's going to do tonight. So this was after that. So Farley now made it a point where I know I'm golden. I'm going to just throw whatever shit I want. I want to say this is the one where he wanted to be a lifeguard. And this skit was kind of rehashed and actually used later on, but he wanted to be a lifeguard of a baby pool. And he wanted adults to play babies in the pool. And he wanted to rip them out and just scream at them. And that's the skit. That's the beginning, the end, the middle of the skit. And Jim Downey would just shoot him down with shit like that, being like, that is everyone is dumber for having listening to what you said. So with that, I'd say Billy Madison on a rehash. It was one of my favorites, but go ahead. I'm sorry.
Josh Mostel is the principal. And at one point, Eric corners him in the kitchen because turns out the principal of the school used to be a wrestler who accidentally sat on someone and killed them. It is so fucking funny when he corners somebody. He goes, he was supposed to tap out. He was supposed to tap out. Josh Mostel is so funny. Like the kids go to his house to try to get Billy back in school after he like lies about it. And he goes, well, I don't typically let children in my house after school. Like all these children are like on his front porch. He goes, but I think there's a higher circumstance here. Did you know he is the son of Zero Mostel, the guy who played Max Bialystock in the original Producers? His dad's like a really famous Broadway actor.
I had no idea.
Yeah, but he's one of the actors that show up in all of these movies because he's in Big Daddy too.
Yeah,
he plays
we'll see him again in Big Daddy.
Agent.
Correct.
It's just like I love when like I love the idea that Adam Sandler knows who he works well with. I don't know if it's a casting director who like follows him through, but like his people are in everything, and I love that because you know who you can play off well.
And I think it's true to why we see, like in our early 2000 comedies, the era of Vaughn, Stiller, Wilson, Farrell, like that like frat pack as they were called. And like they worked well together because a lot of it is comedic timing and knowing, your give and take and stuff like that. But Sandler has this niche. He has this core group of guys that he can pull from, and they can succeed on their own. And the number one Grandma's Boy, I think is arguably one of the funniest films of the early 2000s, and Sandler's not even in it, and it's literally just his cast of goofy side characters made a film together and had a great time to it.
So you just blew my fucking mind. I never knew there was a thing called the frat pack. Because I knew about Leo's group. What were they called? They were
oh my god.
They were something heinous. It was Leo, Tobey Maguire, Matt Damon, Ben Affleck, and Ed Norton. They were like bad dude. Like they were like not great. But the frat pack
they were the Brat Pack.
Were they
the Brat? They were the Brat Pack. Because it was the Rat Pack, the Brat Pack, and then the Frat Pack. I think it's the Brat Pack.
Hold on. Because they also called themselves the Pussy Posse.
Oh, that was the other one. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. Okay.
Okay, but I had no surprise here. These are some of my favorite actors. Jack Black, Will Ferrell, Ben Stiller, Vince, National Treasure Vaughn.
Yeah.
Owen Wilson, Luke, and Leslie Mann, everyone who I love. I'm just looking at the list of these people, and it's just these are the actors, these are my comedians, these are the people I grew up with, and
Now, what's there is a person, his name is Judd Apatow, and he is the ring around all of them. Judd Apatow was Adam Sandler's roommate in California.
No fucking way.
Yeah, when they were coming up, Sandler talked about it briefly, and I think I blew past it in the notes, but yeah, they were roommates at one point. And that's how when we get to Big Daddy, we'll talk about that. But
holy shit, that blows me, because Freaks and Geeks is probably my favorite one of my favorite television shows that's ever. It's one of the only shows I own physical, and I've owned it since it came out. I have this. I don't keep things. I'm not a person who keeps physical items very long, but I have owned Freaks and Geeks since the day it has come out until right now. It's in the other room. So everyone except that one guy are some of my favorite people on earth. Damn.
Don't name them. We know.
Yeah. You know who it is. Okay.
You know.
Wedding Singer.
The Wedding Singer.
I had only seen this 2 years ago. So we were at Scarlett's parents, and it was on, and she's like, "You've never seen this?" And I was like, "No, I've never watched it." And I start to finish, I was like, "That's one of the greatest things I've ever seen." I was like, "Wow." But I read your first thing, because now I'm in shock, because I know this person.
So The Wedding Singer. This might be, and I know I said Madison, and again, upon rehashing similar to Dan, you look back on it and you're like, it's funny, but The Wedding Singer, this still holds up as probably my favorite Sandler flick. I saw it a ton of times with my mom. My mom loved it because it just really encapsulated the 80s, and I guess my mom had a lot of fun in the 80s. It's directed by Frank Carrassi. He worked again with Sandler in Waterboy and Click. another Harley writing project. Sandler, Carrie Fisher, and Judd Apatow all worked on it, uncredited. Fisher did a lot of the dialogue, and she actually, originally when the first script came out, Drew Barrymore's character was very one-dimensional, and Carrie Fisher, being the amazing person that she was like, absolutely not. This needs to be a fleshed out role. Very kind of like her motto always when writing, and one of the reasons why she was one of the best script doctors ever, was make the woman smarter and the love scenes better. And not just like better in the sense that like, cinematography, but like actually make the dialogue reasonable, make it seem like these people actually like each other, which I think kind of falls flat in certain things. But Sandler and Apatow, basically most of the one-liners and bits, Sandler and Apatow wrote the song when Sandler basically is going through his dark phase about killing himself.
I'm listening to a lot of The Cure.
So you can obviously where like they beefed it up a bit, but yeah, this was mainly Tim Harley. Sandler finally is now at $5.5 million for this project. This was the first of 3 Drew Barrymore, Adam Sandler screen pairings. So this is where it gets kind of interesting. So Drew Barrymore's boyfriend, when it was originally written, they really wanted Jim Carrey, to play the foil for Adam Sandler. When producers had kind of seen this, they were like, oh my God, we'll take the 2 like biggest comic actors at the time and we'll play them off of each other. I don't know if people realize this, but Carrey was getting like $20 million of film at this time. We're talking in a run when Ace Ventura 1 and 2, The Mask. Oh man, I'm blanking on the color ones, but he was like actually generally knocking them out of the park. So he wanted too much money, obviously. And then the other one was Christopher Macdonald, who you'll see in Happy Gilmore as Shooter McGavin. Problem is, he's like 20 years older than Drew Barrymore, and they thought it was going to look weird. He also was stuck on reshoots for Flubber, which I think
was he the bad guy in Flubber?
Yes,
he is. I haven't seen that in forever.
Oh my God. I think you can skip it. The last thing I want to harp on, because I found this the most interesting, was why did they settle on Drew Barrymore? Now, if you're not familiar with Drew Barrymore, she comes from a very esteemed Hollywood family, the Barrymores.
Philadelphia.
Yep. There was a lot of fucked up stuff about the Barrymores. We're not going to get into that, but let's just say she got checked into rehab at the age of 13. She had a very serious drug problem, and she was trying to like write her life. This is about a year or so after Batman Forever. And she was in between a couple projects at the time, but studios were hesitant. You have to be insured. A lot of people don't realize you have to be insured when you actually do a film, and certain people are higher risks for insurance than others, obviously. Now, if you're someone who has been in rehab, kind of hit or miss box office success, insurance companies are like, I don't know. So the first person they went to was Jennifer Aniston, who actually really wanted to do it. She had conflicts with friends that she could not get out of it. The other one, Heather Graham, which is funny that we brought up Boogie Nights earlier. She was the roller girl.
Big dick movie.
Yeah, Heather Graham, he's still in my heart.
She's in the classic Todd Phillips film, The Hangover.
Yes, she is. So she was finishing up Boogie Nights and prepping for Lost in Space. So they screen tested. Now, how they screen tested was Barrymore actually sent a personal letter to Adam Sandler saying that she loved his work, really wanted to work with him on a project. And Sandler put his neck on the line for Drew Barrymore and said, just give her a screen test. Let's get this started. Because Sandler started to get a little more sway. Obviously, he made $5 million on, getting paid. You have a little more swing. You co-write the fucking film. Like, they do a screen test. Everyone's like, wow, you guys have chemistry. Crazy. Guess what? She gets hired. And this is one of 3. And I think their dynamic, and I will say this, they are one of the best on-screen duos that I've seen. I think too, because they look like normal people, if that makes sense. I don't know.
they look like normal. I do think they have the best on-screen chemistry of anyone who isn't like married.
Yes.
Like they're just good buddies, and like they have such on-screen chemistry. Like it's unbelievable. It's like who's it? Clooney and not Jennifer Aniston.
Julia Roberts.
Julia Roberts. They have it too, but like
schwarmy. Theirs is a little schwarmy though.
It's
yeah.
Sandler and Barrymore, like even when they're bad movies, like The Blended or whatever those are, they still have such good chemistry together really that it's like, this feels real. Out of the list of I think Uncut Gems is the best of these movies, but I do think this is the best movie. I was very emotional when he sang, I Want to Grow Old With You.
Yeah.
And but the thing is, it's a very well-made movie because that shows up as a motif in the score since the beginning. The music from that shows up many times as you see them falling in love. And I'm watching it, I'm like, wow, this is a really well-made movie. Like, this isn't like, the score was really well done. Like, it's like the first time I personally, I saw Adam Sandler and I was like, he's like a really, really good actor. And he plays comedy so well, but he also plays the love stuff just as good because it's all about timing and things like that. But The Wedding Singer is such a good fucking movie. And there's so many great scenes. When they're in the bar and the grade A cut of meat, but they're talking about David Bowie and they're singing David Bowie and the guy's like, I hate him. And I was like, I'll fucking kill you. Stuff there's stuff like that. This movie is just, I just don't think, I was thinking about it. I was like, I don't think they make romantic comedies like this anymore just because it's more about how pretty the people are. And I love everyone in this, but they're just normal people, which is, I think, what I really like. And it's just so well written. And again, with what you're saying with Fisher was make these people three-dimensional. They're not, you can't just have female characters that fall flat. But the guy who did the score for this, Teddy Castellucci, has done pretty much all of their movies. He did 50 First Dates, he did White Chicks, he did Anger Management, Eight Crazy Nights, Wedding Singer, Big Daddy, Deuce Bigelow, Male Gigolo, Little Nicky, all of them. He's their composer, but it's the songs are so good. I think my favorite quote from the movie, I mean, other than once again, these are things that could have been brought to my attention. His yell is so good, but the I had to literally pause it because I was laughing so hard. Not porno tongue, church tongue.
Church tongue.
It is just a very funny one-off line. Julia Gulia, where he says it and the other guy doesn't get why that's funny. All of it. And the Van Halen line, please get out of my Van Halen shirt, you're going to jinx it and they might break up. I had to ask Scarlett if they actually did break up. Yeah. She's like, yeah. I was like, oh, that's why it's funny.
I think, Hey Linda, you're a bitch.
Yeah.
So there's this split where obviously, for those who haven't seen it, Sandler gets left at the altar, by this woman, Linda, who basically is just you're a wedding singer. You're not going anywhere in your life, which hindsight 2020, yes, wedding singers are not really a thing anymore. I actually think bands are surprisingly coming back at weddings, but that's a whole other thing we don't have to talk about. But there's a moment where
wedding politics.
Yeah, we're going to get into that. He hits this wedding. It's funny because when you see the lighting, it's so crazy. It's so subtle. The lighting changes when he does his first wedding and it's all bright and stuff like that. And then when he does the second wedding, red, it's very red. It's God. Very it's that fake love look to it. And he is just an absolute mess. And he's singing about how love isn't real. Yeah, he just goes nuts. There's this interaction where the father of the bride goes back and forth as you're the worst wedding singer. And he's like, I'm going to strangle you with my microphone wire if you if you don't stop. And then the father bride keeps going on. And He says, well, I have a microphone and you don't, so you will listen to every damn word I have to say. And if I ever do a speech and I go off the rails and anyone ever tries to interrupt me, I'm going to use that.
Good.
This is a weird movie, but it's weird good in the sense that you go in with this apprehension that it's going to be one thing and it's completely something else. It has a lot more heart than it has any right having. The on-screen chemistry between Barrymore and Sandler is off the charts. It hit a great time. So it comes out in 98. People are like, 20 years removed from like the middle of the 80s, basically. And a lot of people who grew up saw this film, and it's like a rehash of their childhood and like the weddings they went to and everything like that. But you just root for Adam Sandler and Drew Barrymore. And I think that's the thing. You watch certain films now with couples and you're like, I could give a shit if a wood chipper gets introduced and the guy jumps into it.
There's a bad guy too, which I think
yes.
a lot.
Yes.
Like there's an actual bad guy to this movie when Billy Idol like hits him with the
drink cart.
The drink cart. Oh fuck, Billy Idol. We have a song from one of our first class customers because we pretty much just let them do whatever they want. It is a very funny. John Lovitz is so fucking funny in this movie.
Oh yes,
he's only in it for a scene.
Yeah.
he talks about how his business has gotten so much better since what's his face went off the rails.
Yeah.
But there is one scene where he's standing behind the curtain. It's like this red curtain, and John Lovitz is just like watching. I think he's a very funny guy. And then Buscemi is in the beginning with the wedding where he's the best man, but he gets
hammered. He talks about how the husband and him went on a trip and they had prostitutes, and it's a great bit. But you talked about the score, and the last thing I kind of want to talk about is so the music behind this. The CD itself did well for the film. Like it was one of those "Oh Brother, We're Out There" situations where like the CD actually did as well as the movie in terms of sales. A lot of great 80s hits, and also Sandler. A lot of people wanted to listen to Sandler's songs from it. Did so well that Broadway actually had a musical called The Wedding Singer. Now, the first person to play Sandler and the one who actually pushed for it to make on Broadway because they thought that he could fill the role so well was Stephen Lynch. If you don't know who Stephen Lynch is, look up his music. He did a lot of also questionable parody songs himself, but it actually was like a Broadway hit and a success. So it's crazy to think that Sandler actually had this like multi-faceted thing where he had a film that did so well that they're like, fuck it, send it to Broadway. But the other big note of it, and I didn't include in this, producers saw this film and were like, wow, he can do both. He can be funny and he can do drama. And that is this film is probably the main reason that he was able, given the opportunity that he got in Big Daddy, which is great because I think that's the next film that we're going to talk about. So Big Daddy, I think, has more push on you than me. So what is Big Daddy to you? What is the film to you?
Well, now that I'm an adult, Are you? Yeah, now that I've made it to 30.
Now that I'm grown.
So I watched it when I was young. It was very funny, and it was like this guy like trying to be a dad and things like that. It's like watching him like try to figure shit out, and he's he's a loser. Mm-hmm. Like he's a loser in this movie. He got a bunch of money from getting hit by a car, but like watching it, I was like, this is a accurate portrayal of like you don't get a manual when you're a parent, especially like when you just get it out of nowhere. You just figure it out. And it's like him figuring it out with someone who's not his own kid. There are some very funny bits in this. Like the Hooters thing has not aged well, but it is kind of funny that he keeps bringing it up. He's like such an asshole about it. He goes, I think they're waiting for you down at the Hooters. Then the movie ends with them at Hooters. Like it's nice to see Adam Sandler playing off a kid, like him and the kid, like actually interacting. And like, it's funny as it is, there's moments where you're like, oh, Adam Sandler, like I can't remember his name in the film. Sonny
Sonny.
Koufax.
Mm-hmm.
He's like trying to figure it out. Like the kid first spills the milk, and like most people would be pissed off, but he's like, it's fine. Like we just got to clean it up. He doesn't like yell at him, but eventually you see that come back later when he like teaches him. He puts it in like a lotion thing to put in there. But it's things like that where it's like he's doing his very best when he hasn't done anything else well. But they're like the McDonald's scene. The McDonald's breakfast where he shows up late and he's like screaming at the people. But then he's like he got a homeless man. He had Steve Buscemi. He said, if you stop talking, I'll get you an egg McMuffin or something like that. And he's like, with sausage. Like he goes back and talks to like it. There's so much good stuff in this. It's like very it's just a very wholesome movie. As wholesome as an Adam Sandler movie can be. Mm-hmm. But like this is the one I've seen probably the most. I watched it a couple of years ago and then I watched it like last week.
Yeah.
But it's got a lot of good people. It's got Leslie Mann as Jon Stewart is in it. It's his girlfriend, but he goes away to Japan or something. And then her sister is played by
Joey Lawrence Adams.
She ends up with Adam Sandler, and like she wasn't treated as like a one-dimensional character. Like she had a very important job as a lawyer. Like they all were lawyers, and Adam should have been as well. But like it doesn't like make her bad for like choosing to like do her career, even though she does end up choosing to help him. It's like, no, she has her own thing. Like you can't just put that all on someone else.
Yeah.
I really do love this movie.
And so pretty much what Dan said, and I think you hit it on the head. Like there really is, you can buy every parenting book. It's not gonna necessarily help or not. Like parenting is literally just figuring out how am I making it through this day and how am I getting to tomorrow and figuring out that battle then. And Sandler shows a lot of what parents do of, the first half obviously is a lot of anger and like, why are you doing this? And that's kind of a parent's natural instinct is to be like, why are you doing this? Like, I'm going to be angry about this when really it should be, okay, how can I help you with this? And that's what the second half of the film. And you got it right away, putting the milk in the moisturizing container. And at one point he's weird about the fact that his quote unquote child is stinky. And he's not comfortable bathing him. So he makes him wear swimming shorts in the bathtub. Yeah. And he actually goes out of his way to dress up as a character the kid likes to get him to bathe.
Oh, Scuba Steve's older brother. He dressed up as his older brother to get him to go to the tub.
So that's, and again, this film had no right being as heartfelt as it was, just for some of the insane shit that actually happens in the movie. And, but this was 99. Sandler gets $8 million for this one. Directed by Dennis Duggan. You saw him with Happy Gilmore, Chuck and Larry. He's like a hit or miss with Sandler. Happy Gilmore, Chuck and Larry, Zohan, Grown Ups Part 1 and 2, Jack and Jill. Ugh. And just go with it. But the actual story itself was written by Steve Franks. For those of you who are fans of the show Psych, that is its creator and writer for most of the episodes. And then Farley and Sandler adapted it into a screenplay form. Really what they mean is when you adapt a story to a screenplay, it's pretty much like bulking up with dialogue and actually making like references to how you would shoot the scene and stuff like that. So Steve Franks has this great idea and he goes to the studios. He's like, I want Jim Carrey to play this guy. Again, Jim Carrey's asking $20 million. It's
very weird to think that those two were like in the same like. Yeah. And I'm a Sandler. I don't think I like any of Carrey's movies more than I would watch a bad Adam Sandler movie before I would watch a good Jim Carrey movie.
I think the only Carrey films that were I for some reason Ace Ventura
hate it
1 and 2 But again, I haven't watched them in so long. Like I might go back and look and be like, this isn't as great as I thought it was.
Truman
And
Show
also,
is the only one I would watch because the concept is so good.
yes, I agree with you that. Well, funny enough, Carrie obviously turned it down. Two reasons. One, 20 million was the asking price, and production was like, we're not paying anybody $20 million to do this fucking film. But more importantly, Carrie was so focused on Man in the Moon that he did not want to step away with it. He was in character. For those of you who've seen Man in the Moon.
Oh, he's a huge asshole too. I forgot about that.
Yeah. Watch the documentary about the making of it and how much of a piece of shit Jim Carrey was, because he really took the character to heart.
When he would call Ron Howard like in the middle of the night as
Eddie Kaufman. Yeah.
All right, that was pretty funny.
So Dennis Duggan comes on as director and basically tells Steve Franks that the only choice that they have for Sonny is Adam Sandler. He goes to bat for Sandler. Sandler gets $8 million for this. Everyone's happy. Sandler's father. This is where it gets interesting. So Adam Sandler comes on and he's like, his dad does not have a huge part in the movie, like a handful of times, and then a big moment at the end at the courtroom. He puts out 3 names: Bill Murray, Jack Nicholson, and Steve Martin. Steve Martin was finished writing and about to act, and I don't know if he directed or not, but he was doing Bowfinger. Bill Murray was interested, but he was already on set with Cradle of Rock, and Nicholson was actually offered both the father and the man that Sandler's girlfriend runs away with, who has the 10-year plan or the 20-year plan, whatever.
Old wrinkly balls.
Old wrinkly balls. But Nicholson at the time was taking a break. And he was actually very intrigued by Sandler. They had a meeting and he basically was like, the next one, yeah, I'll do that. And the next one being anger management. So that's how Sandler got into Jack. It's so like Jack and Jill has Al Pacino in it. It's insane when you think about the people that Sandler has reached out to, and they're like, "Yeah, I'd love to do something with you later on." So
anger management. When I was younger, my grandparents are very Catholic. Like my grandmother taught at Catholic school her whole life, and like they took me to see Anger Management. And it is the only film I've ever been forced to walk out of. They're like, all right, we need to go. They made me get up out of my seat and leave the theater. I don't think I've actually watched it since. And I love Nicholson. I think he's a very funny. I mean, The Departed is Scorsese's best movie. I'll fight for that one.
I agree.
Maybe I should watch that.
Yeah, it holds up a little bit. The plot is the plot, but the acting is worth it. We see Jackie Sandler. She was not Jackie Sandler at the time, but she is the server who gives Julian a root beer at the bar. That is Adam Sandler's wife. They met on set there, and they eventually married in 2003. The introduction of Dylan and Cole Sprouse as Julian. So you're welcome, Disney. This is the last non-Happy Madison production. At the end of this, Sandler was like, I'm pretty good at this movie thing. And he got approached by a producer whose name I left off this, and was like, you should make a production company because it's not wine. It wasn't anything bad. It's not Weinstein or anything like that. No, it's just, I completely forgot to put his fucking name up. There's no. There's no nefarious thing there or anything like that. No, he just approached him. He was like, listen, you really, are making these movies for nothing, and they're doing phenomenal. He's like, start your own production company. He's like, that's why you have more insight on the script. Because I think the problem was Sandler was kind of getting tired of competing with other actors for certain films that he wasn't getting. And he was like, fuck it, I'm just going to, I'm going to do it myself, basically. This one was tough to write about. Farley was originally attached to star in this. He died before production began. They removed the role that he was going to be playing. And they rewrote it, and it ended up being Jon Stewart's character. But Jon Stewart's character actually had more to do in the film. which is crazy to think about, like how it would have worked and stuff like that. But I would have loved to just see Chris. I mean, we all would have loved to see Chris Farley. Sandler's friend and former roommate Judd Apatow comes to Sandler, is like, hey, I'm dating this woman. I'm not sure if they're married yet or not. They might be engaged. Her name's Leslie. Can you throw her apart? And that's how Leslie Mann got cast as Corinne in Big Daddy. Yeah. There's so much to
where
this.
do Alan Covert and all of those guys come from?
So Covert, Dante, all of them, a lot of them are kind of just picked up as they go through, like the films you see scattered along the way. From Happy Gilmore, I think Covert plays his caddy, his homeless caddy. Mm-hmm. Waterboy, you see all three of them. You see Dante, you see Covert, and I forget the third one's name. But Sandler starts accruing these guys, like starts grouping them, and he carries them from film to film, which is amazing because they have this genuine side piece. And I think the bigger one of this was Rob Schneider. Rob Schneider in this film, and then as we get into 50 Dates, starts stealing scenes. Yeah. The hip hop anonymous. It's crazy. Sandler's ex-girlfriend talks shit about Schneider being like, your best friend is a delivery driver. I don't know. It's crazy to think that these guys would not be anybody.
No. Well,
grandma's
they got to
do grandma's boy.
But they, I think their biggest, like in these, they're all his they're legitimately just his buddies in these movies until Little Nicky. Then the three of them are like main characters, and they are so fucking funny because they're just like three stoner metalheads, and they're just. Little Nicky is not everyone's favorite, but I genuinely love that movie, despite all the shit. It is just a very funny. The concept is funny, and now I can never watch that Game of Thrones show seriously because what's his not Littlefinger, the Hand of the King or whatever is Adrian. Yes. Yeah, and he was Lizard too, and he's from the Doctor Who place, Wales. But
that made up place,
but I love Little Nicky.
I actually was gonna vouch for Little Nicky to get put on this. If we did 6, I would vouch for Little Nicky because Little Nicky, and I'm not talking about the rom-coms with Jennifer Aniston. I'm not talking about Jack and Jill crazy, but Little Nicky is one of the most polarizing Adam Sandler films in like the people who like and dislike Adam Sandler just because of. It is the most off-the-wall fucking movie. And you can argue that for 8 Crazy Nights because it was like a foray into animation. It's a musical and it's heartfelt, but there's also some really weird stuff in it. But Little Nicky, just from beginning to end, is wild. So yeah, I oh
my fucking god, it's got Rodney. It's one of Rodney Dangerfield's last
films.
He plays Lucifer. Quentin Tarantino is in it as he plays like he's a protester. He's the end is nigh. Dana Carvey is the referee in the
basketball game.
Who inspires the character for 8 Crazy Nights. Like he's very much and then there's the fucking Beefy, the bulldog.
The bulldog.
Fuck! I love Little Nicky.
So. No, I'm not going to get it. We could do a whole Nicky discourse, but I think with Big Daddy, it's funny, it's heartbreaking. You can see a lot of Sandler's earlier films were a lot about growing up and kind of, figuring out who you are. And this one was a very much a fine line of drama and comedy, knowing when to be funny, but knowing also when to pull it back. And we see a lot more about Adam Sandler as an actor now. And I think, he's now been in the film business for almost 10 years. And he's starting to realize that, hey, I can actually do more than just make dick and fart jokes, similar to The Wedding Singer, which I'll say is like his first kind of jump into it. But this is like the big puddle that you're actually getting drenched in. Like, this is Adam Sandler. This is full on Adam Sandler doing what he does best.
Again, it's like so nice when he's like, he like asks the kid what he feels. He's like, well, what do you like? What, like, you didn't pick your name. What's your name?
Yeah.
Like, it's Frankenstein, but it's like he is. I think it's something that parents weren't doing then, is seeing kids on like their level. Like you can't talk to a kid like that. You can't look down at them. They're never going to learn anything.
Exactly.
So yeah.
And the last two things I will put about this, aside from Steve Buscemi's entire courtroom monologue, go look it up. It's great. He starts off by talking about his own father, and then goes into how if OJ can get away with murder, why can't Sonny have his kid? It's just wild. You'll enjoy it. Sandler references the settlement for the cab running over his foot. If you didn't read the notes, do you know how much money he got for the cab running over his foot?
How much?
$200,000 from the city of New York. And that is based on a real settlement that occurred in New York. You can look that up. And then I think the other two things, breakfast ending at 10:30 has always been a gripe with me. I feel like 11 a.m. should have been standard for McDonald's, and I'll fucking fight anyone on that. It is now. But I'm saying, like, I remember back in the day, like, you were busting ass at, to try and get it. But one of the funniest things is Frankenstein killing all the pigeons with a slingshot. And I don't know why I found it so funny, but just like these moments, it's so to set the scene, Sandler's on the phone. Like any parent, you're on the phone and your child is just like, oh, can I go play this? Can I go do this? And you're like, yeah, go ahead, run on to the other room, whatever. And he comes back and he has killed a ton of pigeons that this lady really loves feeding on the opposite veranda. Like, there's just a bunch of dead birds just scattered along like corpses on the thing. And he's just like, the first thing the kid says is, am I in trouble? And Sandler's just like, no, but go inside. Like, we're going to figure this out. And he just watches the aftermath of the woman coming outside, like screaming that all these birds are dead. But it's one of the most honest portrayals of being a parent, because his first thing was telling the kid he didn't do anything wrong. And the second was making sure the kid didn't go down for the crime, and that he was the one to kind of clean up the mess for that. So yeah, I think I'm glad we got an opportunity to go back and look at Big Daddy. As a parent,
one quote from Big Daddy that I really loved. And it's in the courtroom scene is actually very emotional, and it did make me tear up a little bit because he's fighting to keep this kid who he loves so much, and he knows is going to go back into a system that is going to treat him like nothing, because that's how fucking world is. Mm-hmm. And he's talking to his dad, and he goes, "You can be scared that I might get pickpocketed in a bad neighborhood or break my leg skiing, but don't be scared about me being a dad, because I will not fail. I love this kid too much. I love him as much as you love me, Dad. I'm going to give him advice and help guide him, and I'll be there whenever he needs me. I'll fly to New York to be at his court case, even if I disagree with why he's there." Because his dad, the entire movie, like, he knows his son's a dumbass, and he comes to court and legitimately says that. And it's just like, but despite everything, he's still his dad, and he like wants to make sure his life is as best as it can be. I really, really love this movie.
I think I will say I'm glad I got the opportunity to now watch it as a parent, because I don't think I appreciated how much Sandler put into the role and what he, brought to it and put into it. And I don't think anyone else could have done that. I enjoy Jim Carrey's work and everything like that. This was Adam Sandler's movie. This was one of his best movies, and I'll stand by that.
Adam Sandler could do Truman Show. Jim Carrey could not do Big Daddy.
I'd agree to that.
Yeah. I think Adam Sandler has more range than people give him credit for, which people fucking learned for Uncut Gems. But like I love Adams. I really do. I've always loved. The frat pack are like my guys. Like, any day of the week I will go out in that fucking family room and watch 4 Vince Vaughn movies in a row. I don't know, dude. They're just funny guys, and so.
I think Wedding Crashers is probably the film I've seen the most.
God, I watched that recently. Very funny.
I think people forget how over the top Bradley Cooper was not Bradley Cooper, and just him
He wallops him.
Tackling Vince Vaughn when watching that the first time, I couldn't breathe. I was laughing so hard.
I saw that with my mom. That was an awkward one.
It's a great film though.
Yeah.
It really is. It really brings the family together.
Yeah, really awkward. So
51st States. 51st States.
So this happens. All right, let's talk about post 9/11 America for a minute. Post 9/11 America.
I'm so glad you brought this up. I didn't even include that note, but I wanted to say this is the first.
Comedy changed. Comedy became way less about jokes, and it was way more about punching down and like people's identity, and like anyone who's different than you is wrong. And it was like, what the? I mean, I can go on fucking forever about how it fucked up horror for years with torture porn, because I don't even want to get into movies like Saw and all, but like the world changed for American media. Like it was very different. And as much as I enjoyed the plot of 51st Dates, there is so much in here where I'm just like, how did you regress in like your like it was like there's a lot of transphobic stuff in this movie that I did like. I was like, I don't like, this wasn't okay ever. Like, why did this make it into a movie after other movies didn't have stuff like this? It was like, you knew better. But that's all I've got to say about that. We can get into the actual movie.
I mean, but I absolutely agree with you. And I think, you know, so you like in horror, you know, basically the Saw films and torture porn, that was essentially like Guantanamo Bay 101 stuff. Like that really is, you know, it's crazy to think like how much horror has changed. But on the flip side, especially with comedy, and you said it, we started being so angry. Like comedy became angry, and like, you know, the flippant use of the R word and the F word, and you know, just because it was funny to attack those who were different, who could fend for themselves.
It was there before, but it was just like
ramped up.
Center. It
ramped up. So yeah, 51st Dates, directed by Peter Siegel. My favorite film of his is Tommy Boy. He also will go on to work with Sandler again with Anger Management, The Longest Yard. Written by George Wing. Really a one-off here. Not really much more after this. Adam Sandler makes $25 million for this film. God bless him. This is also the only one of the three Barrymore Sandler films to break $100 million at the box office, which is crazy. I don't know what happened with the blended, or I don't know the entirety of that situation, or if it was a limited release or whatever. I don't know if it was blended as a Netflix film or
it was in theaters. It was a bad film. He wanted to go to Africa.
At
some point,
he was just like, we're doing vacations now. That's all it was.
Legitimately has said that he makes movies to go places now, which is awesome. Yeah. Good for him. He's earned it. Like, that rules.
But you can see it here. So originally it was supposed to be in Seattle. That's how it was written. But Adam Sandler was like, no, it's going to be in Hawaii. And they're like, okay, yeah, we'll do that. Adam Sandler was like, yes. Sandler's dad died while filming this. And there's like actually a lot of tribute to Adam Sandler's dad by a couple other comedians. I didn't realize how close Adam Sandler's dad and Chris Rock were. That's a one-off. Apparently, Sandler's dad, when they were early on in SNL, would like host dinners for them when they weren't like working and stuff like that in between. Guys did not get paid a lot through SNL early on, and Adam Sandler's dad actually helped a lot of the younger guys out, and so much so that Chris Rock actually dedicated one of his specials to Adam Sandler's dad. But Sandler was very grateful to be in Hawaii. He got really into surfing and hiking to clear his mind. So this is one of my favorites of Sandler's, obviously. I've watched the least. I don't know why. I think there's not enough to draw me back to watch it again. I will say it's a great film aside from the obvious issues with it.
Yeah.
But there's a lot wrong with this film. But if you completely suspend your beliefs for a second, it's very heartwarming and loving at times. Again, we're excluding the other stuff. Drew Barrymore for the first time, I think actually does more of the work here than Adam Sandler. I think this is Drew Barrymore's film more than I think it's Sandler's film. And I still think this is better than Blended, but Wedding Singer is the best of the three that they worked on together.
It is it's a very interesting concept that it's like a Groundhog's Day, but because of a brain injury, she forgets everything every day. And like when she first realizes that, and like you see all that come out, it is such a well acted scene by not just her, by like everybody, but Sandler. I can't remember the guy who plays her dad. He's in every one of Sandler's films too. He's like a big Sandler guy. Mm-hmm. Blake Clark. Blake Clark. He's great in this. Like he like does not like Sandler at first.
No.
But he starts to warm up, and there's like a scene where he's like, well, you come back to the house, we'll have some beers, you've earned it. There's like stuff like that. It's like you're seeing like a progression with these characters. But again, like Drew Barrymore is the best part of this film, other than like the animals, because he works. Somehow Adam Sandler is a vet in this one, which is awesome.
Go figure.
Oh, one of the major themes of this film is how big a walrus's penis is. It legitimately comes up many times in the film, and then he goes and is saying goodbye to this walrus who he'd worked with, one of his coworkers, the walrus. And the walrus, turns out the walrus has like 3 different girlfriends, and it is such a sophomoric beat, but it is so funny because the walrus is waving goodbye to him, and then his 3 girlfriends are behind him also waving. And I'm like, that is very funny. This walrus is just a Mac dad. He's just out there laying pipe. It is, it's like, I don't think you always have to be sophisticated with your humor.
No.
And it took me a long time. Like I just, for some reason, like for a couple of years, I was like, I'm into high art. Like, fuck that. One day, in the past year or so, I just decided the funniest thing in the world to me was D's nuts jokes. I said, this is my new humor. I am done being big brain bullshit. Stuff like this, fucking love it.
Yeah.
I wish more people did it. I think it's just very funny comedy.
And watching it again for the first, I think this is probably the 3rd time I've watched it. First being obviously when it came out, second time mid to late 2000s, and then now. A lot wrong with it. We'll keep harping on that. But it just, again, Schneider shines again as a background character, and Sandler, you can see, kind of was here and there for a lot of it. I really, really cannot stress enough how much Barrymore really knocks it out of the park. It's a very dramatic thing for her, and the entire movie itself just doesn't make sense at all. The condition and kind of everything that goes into it. But again, suspend your beliefs, enjoy it. Sean Astin, out of nowhere, this muscled up bro.
So funny.
I think the hardest thing was the fact that they have to watch The Sixth Sense over and over and over. And I even had a note in here. I wanted to know if you had to watch a film every day for the rest of your life to keep happy the love of your life, like what film do you think, for sanity's sake, you could probably do over and over again?
So it's one of Scarlett's movies.
Yes.
Wayne's World.
Oh, that's a good one.
She knows every... so, like, some people are like, yeah, I know every single word to this movie. Every single word. Because we watched it the first time I drove down to see her. Mm-hmm. Every single word. I again, huge Mike Myers guy, so like it wasn't a bother to me, but I didn't think it was true. But yeah, I could watch that. Sixth Sense I could not watch on repeat. I love M. Night Shyamalan, but not The Sixth Sense.
No.
Old. That's a good one. Because The Beach Makes You Old, if you didn't hear about that. Could watch that on repeat. There's a character called Mid-Size Sedan, I think his name was. Something like that. Great film. This isn't a bit. I love that movie.
I mean, there's not much to say about this movie, and it's
Wait, what's yours? What movie of Ashley's could you watch on repeat? And how long until you rip your eyes out from watching the Hobbit?
Lord of the Rings.
What's that? Yeah, what's the one where he kicks the fucking helmet and he breaks his toe?
Who?
Viggo Mortensen. Isn't that his name?
Oh, he kicked the helmet. He broke his toe.
He broke it. Did you know that?
Jesus Christ, this is new information.
Yeah, it's sick. Sick
Oh
that they
my
kept
God.
making those movies after that.
Was that in the extras? How'd you find that out?
I had an inside tip. Petey, big
PJ?
PJ
Good old
texted me.
PJ.
He texted me, Dan, you want to get wings tonight? And I was like, Pete, I'm busy. He goes, you want to hear a fun fact about Lord of the Rings? And I said, Pete, I'm busy. Please stop texting me. That's why he lost the Lord of the Rings. But go ahead.
So, oh my God. So I'd pretty much have to pick between Pride and Prejudice, the Lord of the Rings films.
Nice.
I mean, there's a couple of Disney. I could probably watch The Princess and the Frog on repeat. That's one of our favorites. Yeah, it'd probably be The Princess and the Frog.
Human being.
Yeah.
Go straight to new. Oh, fuck. That's my favorite Disney princess movie. Fucking love. Randy Newman.
Hey there, pretty lady.
I'm so excited to ride that ride too.
So I don't know. There's a lot to this film, and I think my biggest problem was like just imagining this poor woman waking up and being like, "Why do I have this kid?" And then it's like, "Why am I 50?" And then it's like, "Where am I?" So that's 50 First Dates. But I really think Dan wants to talk about Uncut Gems.
I fucking love Uncut Gems. I saw it in theaters, and it was I think I saw it at, I want to say it was a theater that wasn't switched over to like the recliner chairs. Mm-hmm. So for the entire last 15 minutes of the movie, I am gripping the arms and like basically pulling these fucking things out of the ground because I felt this is the closest I have ever felt to a panic attack without having a panic attack. Mm-hmm. Because it is so anxiety inducing in the last 15 minutes of this film where like he could have not done it. He could have not bet, but he kept doing it. He kept fucking going and it's like, so basically the movie Adam Sandler has a gambling addiction. It's directed by the Safdie brothers. And the Safdie brothers also directed Good Times with Robert Pattinson and one of the I can't remember which Safdie brother was in it, but I cannot watch that. I genuinely had to turn it off an hour in because like it is fucked up to people who like it's fucked. It was really hard for me to watch. But this is Adam Sandler as just like this jewelry guy in New York City. It is such an anxiety-inducing movie because he like won't stop gambling. At one point, he gets thrown into a trunk naked at his kids' play in high school. A couple of things that most people don't talk about in this movie are just how fucking good Idina Menzel is. Like, she's a Broadway actress. She is so fucking funny in this movie. She wears like, what does she wear? Like her bat mitzvah dress or something. Like, she wears like a dress she hadn't worn since she was a kid. And Adam Sandler's like trying to convince her to not divorce him. And she's like talking about his affair that she knows he is having. Yeah. And he's like, you could hit me. And she like jukes him. She like puts her fist up and he like jumps back and she starts laughing. And I was like, she's great. And I haven't seen her in much like other than, was she in, Rent. Rent's probably the only movie I've seen her in. But she's very funny in this. Like The Weeknd is in it, which is so funny. And Adam Sandler tries to fight him. Julia Fox.
Sure.
Julia Fox was not ready for that.
No.
I loved this movie. And it's holy shit, I'm looking at your note that Adam Sandler's salary was $19 million against a $20 million budget.
Yeah.
They paid him a fuck ton to be in this.
Yes.
Wow. They took it. And so he like was winning. He got snubbed for the Oscars, but he did win. Okay. He did win a bunch of other stuff. And I think one of my favorite award speeches is like he gave a big, nice speech. And at the end, he looks at everyone else who was nominated and he goes, "You can always remember this as the day you lost to Adam Sandler." He gets it. He's a funny. Oh, I know I mentioned it earlier, but the what Adam Sandler wears stuff, if you just look up Adam Sandler's outfits or fashion, he just wears like huge baggy t-shirts and gym shorts all the time. Just a hero. Just a generally great person.
I he wears, I think the attire is called either just got off the couch or just leaving the gym.
Yeah,
and he's probably done both.
God.
This film I had the hardest time watching twice. Again, the same way. It's so anxiety inducing, and the industry that I work in for my regular job, I deal with a lot of people from New York, and a couple of customers of ours are actually from Russia, and one of them was formerly involved in the diamond trade. And I've heard stories from him, and just like how they are very aggressive brokers and salespeople. And it just like kind of, this was not an escape from reality for me. So I think that's why I had the hardest time with this. So the Safeties approached Sandler back in 2009. His manager actually didn't relay the message to him about this film at all. Fun fact. So in 2016, the Safeties finally got the actual money for it. They go to Jonah Hill, and he's attached to it in 2017. And then Jonah kind of backs off of it. And finally they go to Sandler again. Sandler's like, oh my God, yeah, absolutely. I'll do this. And I mean, it's 2 hours and 15 minutes long, but it's such a fast fucking movie. Like it literally, it doesn't stop. And I think that's another thing too. I like natural breaks in films, and this really doesn't have one. It literally is just like, okay, here's the next thing, here's the next thing, here's the next thing. And
because I think it really, its goal is to emulate the feeling of the gambling high. Like you're going, and then bam, you fuck up, and you fuck up hard. And
he does, and he did. And I think it's the most unlike Sandler film. Like if you didn't know who Adam Sandler was and I showed you this film, you'd be like, oh wow, he's a good solid actor. The preconceived notion here is we all know who Adam Sandler is. So you're going into this expecting something, and it's just so wildly different than I'd say anything he's ever done. And yeah, he's done some serious stuff. Funny People, Punch Drunk Love, Reign Over Me, Jesus Christ, Spanglish, one of Dan's favorites. Yeah. The Meyerowitz Stories, Hustle, which if you haven't seen Hustle, it's on Netflix. Phenomenal. If you're a basketball fan, you really have to watch it. If you're not, I would also encourage you. It's
about the Sixers, isn't it?
Yeah. So long story short, he plays a kind of assistant coach / talent scout, former player, who is looking for the next big thing, and he finds it, and it's like kind of like his journey with this guy, trying to make him an NBA sensation and stuff like that. It's just like the shit that goes into and the politics behind it. Very good film, shot in Philly, so obviously I'm going to love it a little more. But Adam Sandler has acting chops. And I think people shit on him so much because, I mean, when you do Jack and Jill, The Ridiculous Six, stuff like that, it kind of takes away. But every great actor has done a shitty film. Like that's the point of the Razzies and stuff like that. Like to acknowledge that, like, yeah, there's definitely some stinkers out there from some big names. Fucking Al Pacino. I'm gonna harp on this again. Al Pacino was in Jack and Jill.
Al Pacino in Jack and Jill
he's also one of the best parts, but
what is it? Is it the Dunkachino?
The Dunkachino.
It is. If you have not seen, I've never seen the movie. I have only seen Al Pacino's commercial musical dance number about the Dunkachino. It is. It's just like there's no words to describe that Al Pacino comes in and dances in a Dunkin' Donuts.
But I think, and even so much that Uncut Gems, absolutely beginning and I would say it's a solid film, something that I don't think I'll ever watch again, just because I don't think my heart can take that film again. But Sandler's career in itself, okay, we can talk about comedies, we can talk about Airheads, Waterboy, Anger Management, Mr. Deeds. You also have to include something like the film Click. I cried at the end of Click, and I had a film I had no intention on having that sort of emotional response to anything that Adam Sandler's ever done. I cried at the end. And then his animated stuff, Eight Crazy Nights. Again, we already talked about it. It's like it's so out there, but it's hysterical. Hotel Transylvania. And then some of his more recent stuff, Hubie Halloween. All right, shows up on Netflix. I play it. I watch it. Is it weird and random? And yes, it's actually a fun Halloween movie.
I watched so he did a big deal with Netflix where he was like,
yes,
my next like 6 movies or something are all coming to Netflix. And I've seen all of them except that one. And I'd like to watch it because it's written by, it's done by like his crew.
Like,
it's got, it's Steve Brill directed it.
Yeah. So funny enough, do you remember Cameron Boyce, I think it was? He's the young actor who died. He had a seizure disorder and stuff like that.
The Disney movies.
And he was in Grown Ups with Adam Sandler. Yeah. He had written a role for him in Hubie Halloween, and he passes away. And then he actually dedicated the film to him. So, I mean, it goes to kind of speak about Sandler has a lot of heart when it comes to who he works with and who he kind of clicks with. The fact that he's done 2 fucking grown-up films. And in this loving tribute to Chris Farley, he kind of talks about how he wishes that he was still around to do those fuck around movies with.
I mean, I guess we're at the. Do you have anything else about Adam Sandler before we talk about that for 30 seconds?
My last comment would just be: if you haven't watched Sandler before, give him a chance. If you think he's just comedy, he's not. There's so much more there.
If you want to see his stand-up as well, the Netflix special is actually really well directed and it's very good. But the Farley song, when that first like people were sharing the video, I don't think I've ever cried. Like I was just like that fucking emotionally walloped me. So our next one of these is about Chris Farley because I got a lot to say about Chris Farley, but yeah, that I'm probably gonna, after this recording, I have a meeting with the editors later, but probably gonna go watch Hubie Halloween because I
you should.
I can't stop. It's Sandman September. I think I'm just gonna keep watching these movies.
There's no Oscar at the end of that rainbow, okay? So don't expect anything, but just enjoy it for the fact that it's just a fun film, and people are so fucking uptight about like movies and what has to be like, you know, groundbreaking and stuff like that. Just enjoy the film. And also I don't normally kind of put this out there, but I want feedback. If you enjoyed this episode, I want to hear what you liked about it. If you want to hear less about the background of the films, you want to hear more of us talking about the actual bulk of the actor, themselves, like, let us know, like, what do you want out of this? Because this is the first of a couple we've got lined up. Chris Farley, there's so much to talk about, and we kind of reined it in. We ran pretty long here, but obviously, you know, we love these characters. We grew up with these characters, and Sandler's been doing films since 1993. He's had a film every single year since 1993. So to have that, you know, length of the career, and now we're going to go to someone who really didn't have that shot, unfortunately. There's going to be a lot more to say, a lot of different things to say. But yeah, we want to hear feedback. We want to hear from you, and just go watch an Adam Sandler film.
Yeah, because this is the first Gate Crashers Live. Like, I'd like to... We have a lot more people from SNL who we're going to cover. We want to know what's interesting. If you want us to talk more about their SNL skits, their writing, like, let us know. Because, like, I really want to keep doing these because, like, these are, like, the comedians I grew up with. And there are some great psychedelic films that I really want to talk about on this show that I haven't gotten to talk about yet. So please give us feedback if you want to hear me be able to go off for 3 hours about the only spy film that matters. That is Gate Crashers canon, the only spy film that matters. Hey, you can find us at gatecrashers.fan. You can find both shows there. Sex and Whiskey, which comes out either the first Friday or first Monday of every month. You can find the other show on Wednesday. There's a lot more stuff coming. Every day we have reviews, analysis, articles, anything you could want to find places that you are going to find your joy. RJ, thank you for coming.
Thank you.
And I'll see you next time. What do they do at the end of SNL? They all like come out on stage and everybody like
they do their bows and their thank yous and stuff like
This
that.
is our
Like,
bows
we want to give a thank you to the Weekend, and and Jamie was here, and
we need a musical guest.
And they're like, and then they play it out and shit like that. Do you want a musical guest?
Yeah, I'll play the guitar for the next one. We could do Lunch Ladyland, and I'll do a full interpretive dance to it.
Yeah, I'll see if I have a recorder.
The worst instrument. All right. Hey, everybody. God bless.
God bless.
It's the big discussions.